I can't believe it's the first Sunday in Advent. I'm not really sure what's happened to the past few months. I only feel like I've only just come back from sabbatical, if I'm honest. But as we start this season of Advent and travel our way to Christmas, albeit slightly, probably very differently this year. This year we're going to be using the tradition of the Jesse tree, helping us each day to focus on a story from the Bible of how God's people have listened and discerned the call of God and waited in fulfilment for the promises God had made. The start of our Jesse tree, hopefully you've seen the picture in the order of service. The first picture is this one. Now, some of the ornaments we're going to use over the coming weeks are handmade, like this one, which I've made, and there's some little blocks as well, because obviously there are more than 25 days between now and Christmas. So each day there'll be a couple of pictures to help us think, a passage from Scripture, and I've set you some questions and prayers you might like to use each day as we unpick each story. So for this one, the stump with shoots coming out of it comes from a passage from Isaiah 11, which says, "A shoot shall come out of the stock of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. The Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. His delight shall be in the fear of the Lord." Now, this picture and passages like this one have made me think about the other prophecies that we read of in Isaiah, especially over this time of Advent, when we read about the prophecies about the coming Messiah or of the coming of Jesus and the hope he will bring to the world. This image and this passage make me think about trees and how they change across the seasons of the year, mainly because there's a bank of trees outside the manse that I've watched a little more intently than normal this year. Also, this picture makes me think about the new beginnings and experiences we have across our lives. I wonder what the reflections you have on the stump of Jesse and this passage from Isaiah today. I wonder if you've ever tried to trace your family tree. My mum does from time to time on Ancestry, a website for exploring your family tree. She does this using old family documents and photographs, at least for the British part of my family. The Polish part is much harder to trace due to my family arriving as refugees during the Second World War and my Polish grandparents being very young when they arrived in the UK. It is fascinating seeing the history of your family going back generations beyond the relatives I remember or have heard about, especially when looking back at family pictures and seeing family resemblances from generations past. And actually, I like hearing all the stories contained behind the pictures of my relatives. It's even more interesting when it is a stranger who adds to your family tree because they are distantly related and they add in their own photographs. Some people, when they trace their family tree, find they are related to famous people or even to the royal family. Sadly, as of yet, we haven't found anything like that for my family. Traditionally, the Jesse tree follows the idea of a family tree, showing the genealogy of Jesus as we find in Matthew and Luke's Gospel. However, in every version of the Jesse tree I've looked at when researching for creating my own, I found a different set of characters and stories. I suppose there are just too many to choose from. But I'm not entirely certain if all the stories we will use over the coming weeks are like a family tree. I remember when I was younger seeing a tapestry in a stately home. I think it was Audley End in Saffron Walden. It was of a family tree that started with the original family of the house and traced its way back to Jesus, way back into Adam and Eve. And I remember thinking how strange it was and wondered if that was even genetically possible. I think the tradition of the Jesse tree I've created for us to use is less like that idea of a family tree, and more a tree of the people of God, those people who God has called across time, who have listened, discerned, watched and waited for the promises of God to be revealed and fulfilled. The term Jesse tree comes from that phrase in Isaiah 11 about a prophecy of the future of the coming Messiah. Jesse was the father of King David, and after the fall of Jerusalem, the house of David became a stump, seemingly dead, with no nation to rule, no throne to sit on, no power to yield. Yet Isaiah saw the stump was not completely dead, but would one day produce a shoot. During difficult times, Isaiah gave the people a vision of hope of what was yet to come, although they had to wait a couple of centuries before the vision came to fulfillment in the birth of Jesus, a descendant through Joseph to David. See, not completely like a family tree at all, is it? Hence, not only the image of a new shoot, but of a family tree in the tradition of the Jesse tree. But in my mind, the Jesse tree or family tree of the people of God doesn't stop just at the birth of Jesus, but continues through the stories and characters we meet in the New Testament right up into today. We are the continuation of that tree, as we too are called and guided by God as we listen and discern God at work in our world and how to share God's hope, grace and love with others. And we too watch and wait in anticipation for Christmas, in anticipation for whatever normality may look like after this, and in anticipation for the hope that is yet to come. This first Sunday in Advent is traditionally the Sunday in which we think about the time when Jesus will return again, the second coming. That snippet from Mark's Gospel I've included for today reminds us of the time when Jesus will return in the future, and the passage implies that even Jesus doesn't know when this time will be. Jesus would have known a great deal, like Jewish thought on God's control on history, implying that God had planned the right time for all these events to take place, and that we leave the timings to God. But even the writer of Mark implies that Jesus does not know about God's timing for all of this. The overall suggestion of this passage, then, is not to sit down and work out the timetable of when these things might take place, but instead to keep awake, to be alert, and to keep watch. Waiting, being alert, and keeping watch seem to have been much of what we have done in 2020, although in a very different sense. One of the phrases even forms part of a government tagline, doesn't it? Yet the waiting being asked for us in this passage is not about suppressing a virus, thankfully, but about continuing the work Jesus has already started and us being part of that family tree of people who listen to God's call across time, the people who have trusted, followed, led, taught and prophesied and witnessed, and even when God's call has asked much of them or didn't even seem remotely possible. Watching and waiting seems a good way to start Advent for 2020, not only as we mark the beginning of an important season in the life of the church and remind ourselves of watching and waiting for the unknown time when Jesus will return, but that this Advent, after watching and waiting what feels like an entirety of a year, this Advent we know we also wait in the hope that we will be able to see our family safely this Christmas, or at least some of them. We wait in hope for the signs of normality perhaps resuming next spring too. And while we wait, while we keep watch, we watch over ourselves and one another to keep each other safe, watching over each other in love and kindness, because 2020 has been hard for everyone. So, perhaps in reflection then, 2020 has feels like it has been a year-long season of Advent. So we wait and watch in hope for all that is to come.